It was May 1940, and I am Winston Churchill. The world was cracking, and I stood at its fault line. Today, I'll tell you how I stayed upright when everything beneath me threatened to collapse, when allies vanished, cities burned, and even hope felt like a reckless illusion. I was not the bravest, but I had to become both, because when the storm comes and there is no shelter, someone must learn to be the roof. I did not begin this story as a giant. I began as a man, uncertain, bruised, humbled by past defeats. My career had been declared over more than once. I had been laughed at in Parliament, pushed to the margins. I had made mistakes, real ones, costly ones, but somehow, in the hour of Britain's greatest need, the mantle landed on my shoulders, and I had to ask myself, not do I deserve this, but can I carry it anyway? The storm didn't wait. Germany swept through Europe like a plague. Poland was gone. Norway had fallen. Belgium was crumbling. France was breaking apart. And over 300,000 of our soldiers were cornered on the beaches of Dunkirk, backs pressed to the sea. And inside the war cabinet, my own circle, voices grew louder. We must negotiate with Hitler, they said. Better to save what we can now, before he takes it all. Reasonable voices, intelligent voices, afraid voices, but I hadn't come to office to make peace with fear. I hadn't been summoned by history to play caretaker to its collapse. I didn't walk into hell to ask for better terms. I came to lead, and that nearly broke me. I walked the halls of Downing Street at night, alone, hours after the shouting stopped. The silence was louder than anything. The paintings stared down at me. Former leaders, long gone, some loved, some forgotten, some despised. I wondered if I would join their ranks. And which I smoked endlessly. I paced the war rooms like a ghost. I whispered arguments to myself long before I would speak them aloud, because before you can convince a nation, you must first convince the voice in your head that says, "This is hopeless." I wrestled with that voice every night. It told me we were finished, that England would burn, that I would be remembered as the man who stood in the gap and let the tide throw. But something deeper always answered, not louder, not stronger, just ... clearer, it said. Not yet. Leadership isn't born in noise. It's born in quiet. It's what you do when no one sees, when everyone doubts, when you, yourself, doubt. The real enemy wasn't in Berlin. It was in hesitation, in despair, in the easy, polished arguments that said, "It's not weakness, it's realism." But I knew better. Realism, when soaked in fear, becomes surrender with better branding. So I stood, in front of the war cabinet, in front of Parliament, in front of the entire nation, and I said what I had rehearsed only in silence. If this Long Island story of ours is to end at last, let it end only when each one of us lies choking in his own blood upon the ground. It was not a speech, it was a decision, and that decision echoed, because when you take fear off the table, only action remains. The days that followed were not glorious. They were brutal. The Blitz began. London lit with fire from the sky, buildings reduced to dust, children dug from rubble, smoke, ash, the constant howl of sirens. I walked through the ruins. I didn't wear a mask of strength. I wore the truth. Exhaustion, grief, and the weight of knowing the worst was yet to come. But I kept walking, because people don't follow perfection. They follow presence. I stood in the craters where houses once stood, and shook the hands of men who had nothing left. They didn't ask me for answers. They only asked if I was still standing. And I was, barely, but standing. Every speech I gave to Parliament, I gave to myself first. in the bathroom mirror, in the dark corners of my office. Before the words reached the air, they had passed through fire. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight in the fields. We shall never surrender. Those weren't just lines. They were anchors. I threw them out into the void and hoped they'd hold, and they did. Because sometimes the bravest thing a nation can do is believe its own voice. When people ask me now, what was the secret? How did you endure? They expect tactics, cleverness, something elegant. But the truth is simpler. I made a decision. I decided that history would not happen to me. I would happen to it, even if I had nothing but breath and backbone. Because resistance is not a moment. It is a mindset. It's the decision to rise when it's easier to fall, to speak when silence is safer, to stand still while the ground shakes. Courage isn't fireworks. It's not roaring speeches and perfect words. Courage is grey, quiet, heavier than it looks. It lives in the spine, in the space between breath and decision. Each morning I asked myself, will you rise again today? And every day I did. Not because I felt strong, but because I knew they needed me to be. You don't need to feel ready. You don't need applause. You don't need guarantees. You need to say, I will not fold. That's it. That's the threshold. Let the skies fall. Let the future shut its doors. Let them call you foolish. You remain. Because leadership is not inherited, it is claimed. And if it falls into your hands, scarred, burning, heavy, carry it with silence, with rage, with scars. Carry it anyway. I did not win the war. I didn't storm the beaches or drop the bombs, but I carried the fire long enough for others to light their own, and that was enough. If you're in your own war right now, if your future is fog, if your strength is fading, if no one sees you, then hear me now. You were not chosen to be certain. You were chosen to endure, to carry, to continue, to lead, even when no one follows, especially when no one follows. And one day, not today, not soon, someone will look back and say, they didn't surrender. And because of that, I didn't either. And that will be your legacy, just as it was mine.